My name is Laura Becker. I'm a detransitioner, and I'd like to talk about how gender issues can be caused from childhood abuse and PTSD. An important reason for why young people are flocking to gender transition that isn't being talked about enough, but stands to reason is one of the major concerns for the mental health of the young transgender population, is childhood trauma. Childhood trauma can be conceptualized in different ways, including ACEs or adverse childhood experiences, complex PTSD or CPTSD, and post traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. For me, growing up with childhood psychological and emotional abuse and other adverse childhood experiences, developing gender identity issues and being transgender were just one of many maladaptive coping mechanisms that I used to deal with the undiagnosed trauma and subsequent mental health issues. After being trans identified for 5 years, I was finally diagnosed with PTSD at age 22 and realized that all of my gender issues could be explained by trauma instead of gender dysphoria. I realized that the entire transition had been a mistaken way to try and free myself from a traumatized state of body and mind. Many symptoms of PTSD overlap with gender identity disorders and other mental health issues, such as self hatred and self loathing, obsessive, ruminatory, and compulsive thoughts around the body, sexuality and intimacy confusion, an unstable sense of self and identity, hypervigilance and anxiety about how others perceive you, feeling deeply misunderstood, as if there's something wrong with you without knowing exactly why, using fantasy as a form of escape from painful reality, disassociation from self, feeling unsafe in your physical body, using body modification or extreme self expression as a form of control, severe depression, generalized and social anxiety, suicidal ideation, self harm, substance abuse, attachment problems, and much more. I had all of these problems, none of which were being properly addressed in therapy or elsewhere at the time that I started experiencing gender issues as a teenager, and including when I was given free testosterone and had a double mastectomy performed at age 20. It seems obvious in hindsight that my trans identity was all due to trauma, but at the time I was too sick, young, and naive to understand the reality of my situation and was just desperate for relief from my suffering. No one around me knew any better or knew how to help, including the medical professionals who performed the mastectomy and who casually signed off and administered my medical transition. Once I realized that I had PTSD, I detransitioned immediately after, then having to deal with the additional grief and trauma of the transition, identity crisis, and surgery on top of everything else that had already happened. Since processing my childhood issues and getting on the right paths to healing, I see clearly how, as a suicidal, traumatized young person, I made the mistake of thinking that maybe I was, should be, or could be a gay trans man instead of the mentally sick child that I was inside. The obsession with being a gay man was partly due to the insecure attachment that I formed towards men as a result of childhood abuse, and the pattern I had of being attracted to and fixated on gay men who were just more unavailable male figures who couldn't love me. Feeling like I was unacceptable and unlovable as a straight woman mostly came from being dehumanized throughout childhood and made to feel as though I was a worthlessly mentally ill and broken beyond repair woman, especially as a quirky, non-conforming girl who already didn't fit in. My main message of awareness is how PTSD can cause extreme disturbances that seem to cluster around gender issues. There are actually neurological disorders that need proper healing, not ushering along the medical transition conveyor belt. And PTSD is one of those which can mimic gender dysphoria. We need to do better for the young girls who are experiencing these traumatic issues instead of just affirming them as being trans.